Have a have a great evening and a wonderful start for another amazing e-learning experience. If you can recall your memory back to included 25 guest speakers from Sri Lankan and global expertise on various topics under the tagline of Even with an Expert, mainly to strengthen our journey towards achieving sustainable development goals number 17. We exactly we exactly know that the gravity of knowledge, value addition, and knowledge sustainability towards our commitments on ethical and sustainable plantations management, keeping our eyes on the future demands and trends. Today, we are back again with our landmark learning journey with another fantastic tagline, Expert Talks. Inviting again global and local experts to talk on different and current demanding hot topics to upgrade our knowledge and enhancing the existing knowledge with the support of science-based new knowledge. First session, we have selected one of the global hot topics, which is significantly relevant to agriculture sector, emerging global trends in climate action and climate finance in landscape in agriculture sector. Dear friends, climate change, one of the hottest topic of the hour in entire globe. Climate change affects every corner of our planet, from the poles to the top tropics, from the mountains to the oceans. Mainly of the world's biggest challenges, from poverty to wildlife extinction, are made more difficult by climate change. We know why our climate is changing. Carbon emissions are causing the greenhouse effect, trapping heat and making warm faster than could happen naturally. Why climate action is urgent? Global temperatures have been rising for over a century, speeding up in the last few years. We have already warmed by 1.2 degrees since pre-industrial levels, as per the records available. Internationally, it has been agreed to cap warming at 1.5 degrees, the limit at which we can hold the worst impact of climate change. Even at 1.5 degrees, my dear friends, there is like to be ice-free summers in the Arctic every 100 years. Also, around 70% of the world's coral reefs lost. But at just half a degree more, 2 degrees, would see the likelihood of ice-free summers increasing to every 10 years and the loss of nearly all the world's coral reefs. So we know what needs to be done. We need to cut man-made greenhouse gas emissions drastically, phase out fossil fuels and more to renewable energy. We need to be more efficient and use less energy, and we need to tackle deforestation and eat less meat. But at the moment, if all the governments of the world acted on the promises they have made, we would still reach 2.8 degrees. And we are a long way of those promises being turned into reality. The next phase is climate financing. As measured in the Global Landscape of Climate Finance 2021 report, the total climate finance has steadily increased over the last decade. As you may be aware, climate financing is a multifaceted concept. It generally refers to finance for activities aiming to mitigate or adapt to the impacts of climate change. However, it is sometimes conflated with the related and overlapping concepts of green finance, sustainable finance, and low carbon finance. We have the knowledge and the tools. We just need leaders to lead the way. Today, to address this emerging topic, we have invited one of the best experts globally and proudly a product from Sri Lanka, is Ranga Pallawala. So in behalf of Dr. Roshan Rajzore, the Managing Director of Helis Plantation Sector, and Mr. Andra Veerakon, Director CEO of Calendar Valley Plantation PLC, I would like to warmly welcome Ranga to the first session. So warm welcome to you, Ranga.
And,
Thank you very
much, Anuruddha. Happy to be here.
And traditionally, it's my duty, Ranga, to introduce you. I know everyone knows you, but it's my duty to introduce you. Give me another 1 minute. So, Mr. Ranga Pallawala, climate change and environment policy expert, European Union switch, Asia policy support component. Presently, is at Bangkok office. So, Ranga Pallawala is a climate change professional with over 20 years of national and international experience. He is currently working as the international climate change policy expert of the European Union switch Asia program. Prior to this, he was serving as the climate finance advisor under the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub of the Commonwealth Secretariat. He obtained his first degree from Faculty of Agriculture, University of Peradeniya, and Master in Environment Management from University of Colombo. Ranga is a well-known expert on climate finance in accreditation of direct access entities for the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund, GCF. He's also serving as a member of National Expert Committee on Climate Change Adaptation of the Government of Sri Lanka, while serving as a visiting academic in University of Colombo, Open Institute of Sri Lanka, Institute of Applied Material Flow Management in Germany, and European Capacity Building Initiative under Oxford Energy Institute of UK. I have a long profile. With the time, let me have his permission to cut down to this level. So with that introduction, Ranga, would like to hand over the session to you.
Thank you so much, Anuruddha, and thank you very much, the Ellis Plantation Group, Dr. Rajadure, and everybody. And it's a great pleasure to be here again and talking to you. Let me share my screen. I have a few slides with me, so I can go through the slides and talk. And in any case, if you get any kind of a disturbances in terms of that you don't hear me or the slides are not moving, just please don't hesitate to disturb me so I can do that. So my topic is a little long today. It's about the emerging global trends on climate action and climate finance landscapes with special regards to agriculture sector. What I'm going to do is it's a bit of a long presentation, so I don't need to make it very boring. So I have been using a lot of graphics and videos and very less text, so people can enjoy it. And as a planters, I'm sure most of you have been here, right? And I know you. I know everybody knows this place. It's Nuwara, and Nuwara is personally very related to my personal life as well, because my childhood I spent in Nuwara as a government servant. My father served in Nuwara, so I had I would say, luxury of having my primary education there and live quite a significant time in Nuwara. And then I moved to Colombo, and it was a completely different life. And during my childhood at Nuwara, one of the most significant thing I have experienced, and most of you might have also experienced, that it's the only place in Sri Lanka where coconut oil was sold in kilograms, isn't it? It's not sold in bottles. And I can still remember the coconut oil has been poured onto a kind of a trace, and it gets solidified, and people used to cut it like cake and measure it in kilograms and sell it, and probably it'll wrapped in around a paper, and you can take home like you're taking a bit of loaf of a bread. So that was Nuwara. But imagine what's the situation now. You get that sort of kilogram measured coconut oil in Nuwara. Of course, there are, but only in few months, not year-round. Simply because that means the room temperature in Nuwara has gone significantly beyond 23 degrees Celsius, which was not the case when I was a small kid. I'm like 40 plus now, and almost 50, I would say. But it was not the case when I was a kid. And I'm sure you must have experienced this as well, why it has happened. And as soon as I moved to Colombo, one of the new things I have experienced in my life is this ceiling fan, which I've never experienced in my life when I was in Nuwara. No refrigerators, no ceiling fans, no pedestal fans, no air conditioning. Go to Nuwara now and ask people if the situation is the same. Are they using pedestal fans, ceiling fans, or refrigerators now? The answer is yes. Why is that? You need it. You didn't want refrigerators in Nuwara way back because the temperature is cooling your stuff, and you can cook and keep stuff even for days without rotting it. And you don't need fans because it's naturally cooling, in fact, so you don't need to go there. But what about Nuwara now? Historical evidences shows that above 25 degrees Celsius in Nuwara town, the ambient temperature was recorded like mostly like 2 days in 5 years. That was the most frequent before 1990. But now if you go there, you can easily pass like 50 days, even 100 days per year. You have more than about 25 degrees Celsius temperature in Nuwara. So you see slowly and gradually, and we are feeling the reality of climate change. It's happening so slowly, so you don't feel it. It has a kind of a rapid change. But if you compare like time frames, it is a rapid change. And if we go in the same pathway, we might not be able to do certain things which we used to do in the past, including agriculture. So this is where it's very significant for the agriculture sector. So in my presentation, what I'm going to cover today is like the climate change impacts and the way forward, give you a bigger picture and the trends, and of course the global trends in climate change regime, because it's quite important how the new policies are coming into place and how the international regulations are shaping up, including trade, commerce, food industry, packaging industry, shipping, everything. So need to have an understanding how the global climate change regime is happening. And it's obvious that we need to go through a transition phase, and it should be a smart transition, and how that transition can happen. And I will talk a little bit about the agriculture sector transition. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about climate finance and what is climate finance, why we need it, and how we can access it. Finally, we'll go for the options. What are the options? And probably a little Q&A here as well. Before I move into the next topic, this is a kind of a direct cut and paste picture from the very recent 6th assessment report of the International Panel on Climate Change. That's the largest collective of the scientists around the world those are researching and compiling an assessment what we are doing in terms of climate change. Because when we first realize as a human civilization, something on climate is happening because of the increased greenhouse gas emissions. So we have established IPCC very early 1990s. And their first assessment report came up and said, well, we are having a future threat with the changing climate, basically the changing composition in the atmosphere, and we need to get ready for that. And it's mainly because of the increasing concentration of carbon dioxide, and we need to move out from fossil fuel and move into renewable energy. That was the first assessment report released in 1992. So it was looked as a future threat. So after 30 years, here we go. Now we are talking about how to survive, right? And look at this picture, and it shows the green, yellow, and red pathways. And the darker the color in terms of red, that means we have lesser chances to survive as a human civilization or as a planet. So probably you, me, everybody will not be there. But unfortunately, our kids have to face that situation pretty badly. And all what we are thinking as a global development might not go beyond that. And the greener the color, of course, that are the options that we have. But unfortunately, what has happened, when we first heard this in 1992, we had a kind of a smooth path, right? Where the transition could have gone, and we have transformed into a new world without much trouble, I would say. But now what has happened, we have only one option, and that is very hard and very costly, because the transition needs a lot of investment and a lot of money, and it's the toughest. So we don't have the smooth pathways anymore. And this pathway will be with lots of losses in terms of personal wealth, personal health, loved ones, economy, country, infrastructure, money, a lot of things. So unfortunately, now we have this harder pathway and we need to move it. That's what the 6th assessment report, 98% of global scientists, based on the scientific data, has concluded this. So I'm just giving you tough things, but unfortunately, we need to go through this tough pathway if it is. So what we should do? So there are 3 things we need to do as of now. One, we need to avoid further greenhouse gas emissions. We call it scientifically mitigation. We need to do more and more mitigation. That means we need to transit towards renewable energy as soon as possible, do energy efficient things, and make sure that our processes consume less fossil fuels. Plus, we need to make sure that we are not disturbing the existing, the forest cover, and what you call the carbon sinks, the forest, the mangroves, the corals, the seaweeds, whatnot. All these are absorbing carbon from the atmosphere. So we need to at least maintain what we have now and gradually increase the cover. So this is mitigation. And this is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to chase away people and take their lands and plant trees and convert to forest, but it's happened the other way around. So fossil fuel transition is not an easy thing, even though we are talking about renewable energy, you think still over the last several years. Last year, we managed only add like, say, just about 2% of our total energy requirement in the country as renewable energy. Second one is what you call adaptation. That is, we need to adjust or change the systems and our behaviors according to the current and potential changes. We know the temperature is increasing. We know there are going to be frequent and intense natural disasters. So we need to adapt to that. We know what's going to happen in the future, and based on that, we need to change. So this is very much important for the agriculture sector, but not only agriculture sector, but even in finance, insurance, health, everywhere. Third one, the most unfortunate one, is that we need to manage the climate-induced loss and damage, because since we delayed, now we could have adapted to the changes, but now we've come to a level we can't adapt anymore. It creates losses and damage. Damage, of course, we can restore, but losses we can't. So what are these? Sea level rise. It's a big issue. So if the sea level rise for about say 10 centimeters, we might lose a significant amount of our land, isn't it? Imagine frequent natural disasters, how many lives we will lose, landslides and stuff. So we need to manage this. We need to have systems to manage frequently these kind of incidents, and that's an unfortunate one. But if we delay the first 2 segments, that is mitigation and adaptation, we will have more losses and damages. So it's like a small cage, a glass cage. Imagine you're there. So if it is filling with, say, sand, so if you don't go with mitigation adaptation, the sand will basically cover the entire cage, and you will end up with no options, basically. So we need to do these 3 things. So it's not an easy, but we need to do. So change the monotone of my presentation. I have a very brief video. This video gives you how the greenhouse gas emissions from the countries have changed over the years. So just pay attention, because this is quite important to my next topic, which is the global trends and the global policies on climate change. So enjoy. It's about less than 2 minutes, I would say. See the years are changing on your left side. The countries are there. If you give a slight glance of your right bottom phone, the countries per capita emissions. This is the collective amount of carbon dioxide emissions in the country, structure and time. Russian data, Russia India after 1990s, because people have those breaking it into the USSR, breaking into parts, and only the data is so that video shows how it happened. You can see now at the moment the largest emitter is China, and the second is USA, and Sri Lanka is nowhere near the picture. And if I ask based on this, who's responsible for climate change more, people tend to say China, but it's not the case. If you look at the historically, USA is the largest emitter over the centuries. And if you emit carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, generally its lifespan is 50 years. So if you analyze the last 50 years, definitely USA is the largest, the country who has emitted a lot and has the largest responsibility. But this particular graph and the video is quite important to understand one thing. Larger the economic, the higher the economic growth, the carbon dioxide emission intensity grows. And larger the economy size, larger the carbon dioxide emission, right? That's what has happened when China overtook USA as in carbon emission, and you can see China is rocketing towards being the largest economy as well. Same with India. So that means our economy is bound to fossil fuel use. So that means higher the economic activity, higher the fossil fuel use, and higher the economic growth, higher the fossil fuel use. And this is not good in terms of environment and climate change. So what we need to do is, or one of the pathways is basically to detach this, how to detach the economic growth with fossil fuels or the carbon emission. This is the challenge we have. It's not an easy thing, but we need to do it. It's a must. Based on this, we have international cooperation, and we have established what we call the UNFCCC, or the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It's a global collective, I would say. The UN agency brings all the countries together to tackle this issue, because it's a global issue. You can't solve it as single countries, because we are sharing one single atmosphere. So there should all the parties need to be there. And some people asking me, do you really think that the global collaboration can solve environmental issues? And do we have any examples in the history? Likewise, I would say yes. If you can remember what has happened with the hole in the ozone layer. The ozone layer healing has happened through through international collaboration, through the Montreal Protocol. So once we have that protocol, all the countries came up with strategies, plans, and actions and implemented. And now we are not talking about it because it has healed already, which was a huge environmental issue about 20-25 years ago. So we need global collaboration in it. And initially we thought, okay, the high emission countries or the countries with higher historical emissions need to do something more. And there was a protocol called Kyoto Protocol for that, but it didn't work, because you see now the non-historical responsible countries also responsible. So there were diverse things. For example, some people said, no, US need to take the lot of responsibility because they have the highest historical emission. They need to reduce their emissions. And the US said, if we do that, our economy will go down and it's not suitable for us and we can't do that. Same thing by the Russia. And the countries like Saudi Arabia and the Middle East said, if the global world decides to reduce fossil fuel consumption, that will affect our economies and we will bankrupt and we are not agreeing and you need to give us compensation. So there are diverse national interests. The countries like India said we had a lot of poor people and we can't compromise our economy likewise. So to balance this diverse national interest, they came up what you call a bottom-up approach and came up with Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement, what they say is that forget about what other countries are doing. Just say what you can do as a country to solve this global issue. So you determine nationally what you can do, and you said, okay, these are our targets. So the targets are set nationally. So it's a 5-year cycles. The cycles coming in, and we call national determined contribution as the building block of Paris Agreement. So national determined contribution is a kind of a gradual transformation. Once in 5 years, each and every country enhance their targets gradually. You can't go back, but you need to go forward. So they do it in 5-year cycles. And we have 20 years from 30 years from 2020 to 2050. So by 2050, we will come to what you call the net zero status. I'll talk about net zero status later on. So it's a local process and it's a nationally determined, but it needs a lot of things. You need to have capacity, it need to have knowledge, it need to have expertise. They need to have support mechanism, including finance, technology, education, etc. And also, it's an opportunity to mainstream climate change into national development priorities. So if we think, okay, transport is a priority for us, we can say, okay, our transport sector will have climate targets likewise. So ultimately, we need to transit, right? We need to transit what you call climate smart and net zero status. And what is this? What is this climate smart? Net zero is very, very easy. We all know carbon cycle. So that, and there's a process where you absorb the atmospheric carbon and store it, what you call sequestrate it. At the same time, there's a process that we emit carbon dioxide back into the cycle. But what has happened is like we are taking more and more things from the ground and burning and putting into the air, which cause the destabilize the situation. But if you want to go to a stabilized situation, we need to make sure that we come to an equilibrium. So that's the equilibrium we are looking at. That's called net zero. So that means we will slow down the emissions. We will increase the sequestration, and we'll come to a balance there. But as far as the progress concerned now, we are no more there, unfortunately. So this is a very, very quick analysis coming from the World Resource Institute, which sector emits a lot. And you can see it's largely energy, 73.2%. And finally, it's agriculture, livestock, forestry, and land use sector contributes 18.4%. So we can go into the discussion later on, but this is the status. It gives which sector contributes a lot. This is in terms of the emissions. What do you mean by climate smart? Climate smart is that we have climate projections now. We know where we're moving. And in the graph, you can see, unfortunately, we are moving not in a good pathway. Anuruddha mentioned that we need to curtail our temperature rise for 1.5 degrees above the normal average, but we have already breached it. You can see 2023 in the dark red or the brown color line. We have already breached that, and we are going to 2020, 2 degrees before when we anticipate, and it's not going to be good. And based on that, we have certain projections as well, research. So this is some of the projections done by some researchers in Sri Lanka, including Dr. Punyawardana and Mr. Pal. And they have predicted okay, under different emission scenarios, what would happen to the temperature rise in our countries? So they predicted the temperature change in some of the places like in Kandy and Kegol and Ratnapura might even reach to the levels of 1.2 to 1.3 degrees Celsius than the normal average. And unfortunately, that's the reality. By 2020, we have reached that already. So the rest of the maps shows what will happen in 2050 and what will happen in 2080. So based on that, you can get certain understanding, isn't it? Where we are moving and what we need to change in terms of agriculture, in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of what will happen if the temperature increases for the plant productivity? What will happen with the temperature increase in terms of the air condition requirement, the energy requirement, what sort of buildings we might require in this situation. So these are the thinking you need to do. Same mapping has been done for the annual rainfall as well. So the general pattern in Sri Lanka is that we are increasing the southwestern monsoon rainfall, and we are getting a kind of a less rain from the northeastern monsoon. So that means our dry zone is getting drier and the wet zone is getting wetter. Wetter in the sense it's not like you get rain all the time, but when it rains, it goes for the extreme level. But when it's not, it's going to be drought. So what you call the anomalies is increasing. So these figures gives us a kind of an understanding to what sort of a situation that we are heading to, and what sort of changes we need to do accordingly. That's our own planning. So that's basically the climate smart. When it comes to agriculture, unfortunately, it's directly impacted from climate change. And it's one of the first sectors to get affected. Before all the other sectors, say the banking, insurance, health, whatnot, agriculture is the first affected because it's bound to the natural environment. And it's the toughest sector to adapt, because it's larger than agriculture, isn't it? It's a too large or too long value chain. It's coming from the inputs to the farm, to processing, to logistics, and you know what, and everywhere it's there. And there are unimaginable amount of direct impacts as well. Indirect impacts, I'm sorry. I will show you a few photographs just to give an understanding. Probably you have heard this before. And recently, you know, Panama Canal is the busiest shipping track in the world, because it saves a lot of travel time around the South America. It goes through the canal from the Central America, but this Panama Canal was built, and it passes through the Central America, so the ships can pass through. So it moves fast, so very large number of ships going there. And you know, it's between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, and the water levels of these two oceans is different. So you can't have it like a one single canal, then it disturbs the entire environment. So they have a lock and water balancing system. So you take the ships and lock it there and balance the water with the other system. So it gradually passes the ships to the other side. And they need a lot of fresh water towards that. But with the drought conditions, now they can't operate Panama Canal as usual. So they have asked ships to reduce the weight they are carrying. They have asked some ships not to come, and they have reduced the number of ships that pass through the Panama Canal. And imagine the trouble it gives. It will affect the international trade. It will increase the shipping freights and the insurance charges, whatnot. Imagine the impact on agriculture. So this is one example. Second one, it's an interesting one. I have seen this about a couple of years back, that UK has started their own tea plantation. Probably you guys know this, right? But just want to mention, in Cornwall, they have started this, the first tea estate, proudly owned by UK, and it's on UK soil. That's how they market it. So that means changing climate creates opportunities for other countries where it was not there because of the changing environment. And imagine if England grows tea, which is quite similar to what we grow in the upcountry in Sri Lanka, what would be the twist in the market? Interesting scenarios that can happen with climate change. So climate smart agriculture you need to do agriculture, and we need to deviate from the business as usual. You can't do the same agriculture again and again because the systems are changing, and it need to change the practices in the sense what you cultivate, how you cultivate, the agronomic practices, the processing practices, whatnot. We need to change it because it's not the same now. And the systems, and sometimes the paradigms in the sense sometimes you need to change the crop as well. You might not be able to plant that crop anymore with the new climate. So you need to think and you need to change the paradigms. And the new systems, whatever the new system that you are imagining, must consider the primary, secondary, and tertiary impacts of climate change. You might see a color coding in the 3 words I have put there: primary, secondary, and tertiary. And you see the primary is a green one. Primary is the direct impacts: increase in temperature, change in humidity, the precipitations, the rainfall. All these things are very primary, and you can see, you can measure it. The secondary are, because of the primary impacts, what you will see, what will happen. For example, reduction in the yield, qualitatively and quantitatively. For example, imagine the increased temperatures. It might not give the same composition in your tea, which we used to have several years ago, because of the changing environmental factors, isn't it? So then you need to change certain things. You can't have probably the same variety, probably the same way of cultivation, and probably the same way of processing. I'm just telling you the framework only. I'm not dictating what to do. The tertiary impacts, red denominates its danger, because tertiary is like, once the impacts reaches to your socioeconomic systems, that's the most dangerous. Socioeconomic systems is that, imagine changes in the water availability in the dry zone, and there's lots of job losses, and people move out from agriculture and move to other jobs in Colombo or any other area. What will happen to the labor market? Imagine your house's roof is blown off from a storm or a heavy rainfall. What you're going to do? And that person, don't expect that person to come and work for you, because it's affecting a lot into their lives. And there are a lot of conflicts happening because of water and because of climate. And with the conflicting situations, the economy is not working as usual. So these are dangerous tertiary impacts. So in agriculture, we need to consider all these potential scenarios that will happen around 20, 30 years down the timeline, and probably earlier than that, if you want to move to a new system. So you need to imagine your new system based on these dangerous predictions on climate patterns. And based on that, you need to dictate your pathway. Okay, this is where we need to move. And we are moving away from the business as usual, right? Imagine how many times you were, battled with droughts. How many times you battled with extensive rainfall since plantations. I think you experience it more than myself. In climate smart transition in agriculture, I would say, not only agriculture, but in other, there are key pillars. So this is not changing based on the systems, not at all. Number one is diversification. It says, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So diversification will give you an additional layer of protection. So it's like, rather than going for monocropping, you diversify your crops, you diversify your regions, you diversify your products, whatever. So the extreme climate events or the extreme events will probably affect not all these products, systems, geographies in the same level. So if one goes wrong, you have something to survive with. That is a strategy. This is not all a business strategy, but it's a personal strategy as well. Second one, nature-based solutions are being now considered as it's a must. Nature-based solution is that nature gives you a lot of options as solutions. So when in the past, we didn't use some of the nature options a lot, but when you have the natural system, when you have more natural biodiversity, so that we have most of the options are there to help us. I think you have heard this, the Sena caterpillar in Sri Lanka. And many of the agriculturists and the biologists suspected that it will grow to a unprecedented levels, and they considered how long it will take to complete the life cycle, and they predicted, okay, this is the peak level of impact, and it might come in the next year as well. But what has happened actually, and then later we realized it because of the biodiversity, there are natural predators took over the system than much earlier than we expected and take over. So that means if you have more nature diversity, biodiversity, there are more options for us to face. Since we don't know what would be the situations that we face in the future based on the climate predictions, more options is good. So you have a larger basket of solutions and you can pick the solution. And probably we don't need to even worry. The nature provides the solution by itself. Third one, it needs to be circular economy focused or sustainable consumption and production. It's not linear. It's not like you extract, make, consume and dispose, kind of a very linear line of economic system. There should be more ways of making it circular, complex circular lines. So you produce the pressure on new things extracted from the nature, but you take the maximum utilization of what you have used already, and you make sure you provide enough regenerative timeline for the economy to regrowth. So it's a circular economy process. So it's basically on sustainable consumption and production. So this has been heavily debated, and now you know that the circular products are coming into the market, circular standards are coming into the market because of this. Finally, I think this term is very familiar for you, the ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspect, because it's embed the pathway that we need to go. So these four pillars are quite important in the climate finance, climate smart transition. This is for all the sectors, and for agriculture also it works. So I'm sorry, I'm taking little time. Allow me another 2 minutes to finish this. It's about climate finance. What is climate finance? There's a huge buzzword. We know that we have a situation and we need to change. We have a lot of challenges in front of us because of climate change, and we need to devise new ways of tackling those challenges. And all these things, we need investments, isn't it? We need investments towards this new pathway. So that investment required to face climate change challenges is simply called climate finance. But unfortunately, globally, even at the UN level, we are yet to come up with a definition for climate finance, agreed definition among all the countries, but this is a kind of a general introduction. Another interesting thing is that if you change the investment flows, or if you change where you invest, you can change where you're going, isn't it? For example, if you reduce the investments towards to fossil fuel, and increase the investments to renewable energy. So that means we do mitigation. So now all the financiers are looking at it, and they want to convert their finances into what you call climate finance. And there are very specific climate finance as well. And now all they are moving to what you call the climate sensitive financing, and that's very important. So this is a very complex diagram. Don't get panic about it. Don't try to read everything now. But all what I need to show here is that this is a climate landscape assessment, finance assessment carried out by the Climate Policy Initiative with the UNFCCC. And it's estimated that during the 2019-2020 period, there have been 632 billion worth of annual finance investments around it. And in the blue and red color, it shows from where these finances came. So you can say most of the things have come up from the corporation, or basically the private sector has invested their own investments towards climate change causes. And some individuals has also done that. Then we have different funds and stuff, but yeah, totally it's around 632 billion. And there are different instruments ranging from grants to debt to equities and stuff. And you can say mostly it's coming under the project level market rate debt or the equities, the balance sheet finances, and that's huge. The third column says the users, and you can see most of these finances have gone to mitigation efforts. But unfortunately, we need to enhance the adaptation efforts as well. As far as the plantations are concerned, adaptation is very much important because your carbon footprint is not that great compared to most of the other sectors. So the adaptation finance is not there, but still, there have been like $46 billion equivalent annual investments toward adaptation finance, and you can see how it changes. But this is just to show the quantum of finance coming towards climate change. And it's important that the private sector as well as the countries are stepping up to capitalize on this and attract more and more climate finance to their countries, to the sectors and to the priority sectors. Because without finances, we will keep on moving in the same pathway, which is not what we prefer, as we discussed a few minutes ago. And this is also a complicated diagram, but only thing I wanted to show is that now there are different other mechanisms coming in, what you call the UNFCCC mechanisms. There are dedicated climate funds coming into play. You must have heard the GCF or the Green Climate Fund. You must have heard the Adaptation Fund. You might have heard the Global Environment Facility. And under the Global Environment Facility, so many other funds are coming in. Very recently, they have established what you call the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund under this. So these are dedicated to environment and biodiversity and climate change. So these are the funds that probably that gives you more concessional finance to the world, but of course there are other ways as well. And you might have heard this, what you call the carbon trading. Carbon trading is basically that a sector or an industry is given a kind of a carbon budget, and based on that, they have been given different market instruments to work on it. But if you save some of the carbon from the budget, you can sell it to somebody. We call it emission trading. And there's already another system what you call offsetting. For example, if a company in Finland producing something and they are emitting too much of carbon dioxide, and another company in Sri Lanka where they don't emit that much, but they actually sequestrate carbon from, say, biodiversity, say, forestry, whatever. So they can offset. So the Finland company can buy that carbon credit from it. You must have heard this. The carbon trading was not very attractive a few years ago with the collapse of the Kyoto Protocol, but now it's coming up and it's an interesting area to focus on. So market mechanism is another one. I will not go through this, but for example, GCF is a very large fund and they're expecting to deliver around $100 billion per annum. It's not an easy fund to tap, but luckily, very recently, the DFCC Bank has got the accreditation. So we hope that Sri Lanka might be able to get more fund financing for this. And you can see what sort of activities they have funded. Don't go into that, but this is just for your information. But I will also want to add one thing. Very recently, the multilateral development banks, including the World Bank Group, the ADB, European Investment Bank, European Bank, all these banks came to a kind of a common agreement that they will align their finances with the Paris Agreement targets. So whatever going against the Paris Agreement, so that means these funds will be channeled to that. For example, now they have stopped financing fossil fuel investments, coal power plants, they will go for more alternative. Even if they want to fund a road infrastructure project, they will closely assess, are there any other the investment that would give the same utility, but not from the private transport modes, but the public transport modes. So these are some interesting. But accessing climate finance is not easy. For example, in Sri Lanka, many companies have reached me personally and asking they want to access to climate finance. How can they do that? But it's very important to understand Sri Lanka is a small country, so we need to justify the quantum of climate benefit. Climate finance is coming to solve the climate change problem. So we need to show that we are addressing that problem effectively, and we should give the number, value for money. So the value for money coming from how much of GHG emission you are reducing by investing $1. How many people's resilience you have increasing by investing in adaptation, and what's the ecosystem coverage you are planning to do through this investment. Those kind of things are very investment. So that means I'll go to the third point here. That means you need to have a lot of climate rationale. You need to prove that you are investing to solve the climate change problem, and you need to do a lot of stuff with data and measuring, reporting, and verifying those data as well. So data and MRV is going to be a crucial thing for most of the companies and most of the countries if they want to access climate finance. Visibility in climate agenda is quite important. I told this in the conference as well. The plantation sector is not reflected in the Sri Lanka's indices or the climate agenda. So therefore, unfortunately, the plantation sector has a lot of challenges to accessing climate finance. So step one is how to make sure the plantation sector is included in the climate agenda of the country, and how you work on it. Because if that visibility is there, so you have one hurdle solved. So I urge again the management and the people to work with relevant authorities and make sure the climate change agenda is reflecting the plantation sector needs and things. So finally, it's about the new standards coming in. It's not one single standard, but several. You might have heard this carbon border adjustment mechanism. At the moment, it works only for few commodities like steel, cement, and stuff. But it's likely that they are going to expand it for other products. So that means when you are exporting your products to those countries, and you will be taxed additionally based on your emissions. So these are new standards coming in, and probably you have seen the new reporting standards coming in for Europe. So that means if you are exporting product to Europe, you need to make sure that you are complying with those standards as well. So these are new standards. So these are challenges. So if you want to transform, I think it's important to consider these challenges as well. So sorry, Anuruddha, I took little time. So I'll stop my presentation here, and I allow you to ask any questions or clarifications. I'm happy to provide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ranga. I think fantastic start of this new journey. Again, expert talks, emerging global trends in climate action and climate finance in landscape in agriculture sector. An expert who knows the landscape properly today addresses the session. I think that's the most fantastic feature that I see. So you have gained real value to the participants to think differently on this hot topic. The session is open for questions. Maybe we have a little few minutes. If anyone has any clarifications, any questions or any comments on this topic and speech by Ranga, now is the time to raise. Ranga, before they think of their question, but I have a concern on behalf of the team. Looking at your the video that you have presented in the presentation, the carbon dioxide emission, the different countries representations, where maybe I have missed here and there, but I saw the European countries like Poland, Netherlands, and some of the European countries, some other European countries, they were on the top of the graph. And later part, I saw that they were rapidly disappearing, close to this few decades. Especially countries like Poland, Netherlands, the Poland was on the top, but they were disappearing last 20, 30 years. Is there any, we know certain things will happen there because Europeans, they have taken very strategic decisions on certain things that you discussed today at your topic. Anything that's special that we can learn as Sri Lankans as in agriculture sector, because those countries are practicing a lot of in advanced high-tech agriculture practices as well. Any learnings for us as Sri Lankans and especially plantation professionals that we can learn from them, how best that we have gone, they have gone for them to rapidly disappear on that scenario?
Good question, but unfortunately, it's not a positive story that I have to share. It's not that they have reduced their emissions. What has happened is other countries have increased their emissions above them. Unfortunately, so far, except Costa Rica and Bhutan, none of the countries have reduced their emissions in the history. We have been gradually increasing in varying degrees in the over the years. Even Sri Lanka, we have increased, but the collectively as Sri Lanka, we are a small country, number of people is less, but still we are not in that map. But what has happened in the large countries like China and India, of course, the large geographical coverage and the large number of people living in their population, and it has increased the one. So what has happened is it's not like they have reduced, but the other people have increased their emissions above top of it. Then there was an argument on this as well. Some people say that rather than measuring the overall emissions of the country, why don't you measure the per capita emission of the country? Then we can look at the real impact in the world. And if you look at in the per capita emissions, the largest emissions, the per capita emissions mainly coming from the Middle East countries, the Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. And even at one point, Venezuela was there as well. And sometimes even a very small Caribbean island like Jamaica was there, mainly because less number of people live in that country, and their economic growth and high amount of carbon intensity and their lifestyle, etc. So it's a different scenario for them. But unfortunately, what has happened, we have not reduced the emissions. But in terms of agriculture and the emissions controlling standards, of course, they are far ahead from us. And if you can see, especially in the countries like Netherlands and in the Germany and France, they're now coming up with what you call price on carbon and carbon budgets, where we don't have a carbon budget. So they're allowing a carbon budget and make sure that the industries are not going beyond the allotted emissions. And if they're going beyond that allotted emissions, there are ways of punishing them in terms of fines, in terms of taxes, and in terms, or they need to pay somebody else and buy more allowances. So this is happening a lot, and now we see like they move into different systems. But it affects the trade as well. For example, let's take Germany, right? Let's take Germany. They provide a carbon budget for an agriculture company, those who produce, say, strawberries, example, right? So they are giving a company a carbon budget. Okay, this is the carbon budget you have. If you increase, we will fine you. Or otherwise, you need to change your practices. So they need to invest, or they need to buy carbon credits, whatever. So it's an additional cost for their product. So what will happen is that it will come to that additional cost coming into the product. And when they go to the market, they're not competitive in the market, in the European market. So they have seen this as a problem, and at the same time, there can be carbon leakage, what you call. For example, in Sri Lanka, a company is producing strawberries and exporting to Europe, for example. In Sri Lanka, we don't have a carbon budget, so there's no regulatory requirement for us to invest in it. So we can produce cheaper. So we provide cheap products to European Union, and that means the European producers will have a problem with the carbon leakage. They have a price incompetitiveness. So to solve this, what the countries are doing now is taxing the products based on the carbon emissions. So then, one, their carbon emissions will go down. At the same time, they will not allow other countries to emit and capitalize on the cheap market prices. So now there's a global trend, what you call price on carbon. So whatever the emissions you make, there will be a price on it. Because at the moment, carbon emission is not priced anywhere. Some places, yes, some sectors, yes, but now there's a global trend that we will have a price on carbon. So this is, in economics, we call externality. So we are trying to have a market instruments, taxation instruments, and internalize these economic externalities. So this is one of the things happening, especially in the Europe, and it will happen. It will affect our markets as well. So there should be a kind of a early stances to be taken based on this.
Thank you, Ranga, for that deliberation. Thank you very much. Any other questions? We can buy another 1 or 2 minutes from him.
Mr. Ranga?
Yes,
Yeah,
I can.
Yeah, Manoj, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Ranga, I'm Manoj Vijayawardena, manager, Elephant Estate, Norelia.
Yes.
Mr. Ranga, have you done any work study to mitigate the situation what we discussed in Sri Lanka? And if do you have any idea about any plan about to immediately mitigate the situation in Sri Lanka?
Shall I ask a kind of a clarification question? Mitigation in the sense you want to know from the agriculture
The carbon emissions. Yes, like that.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. One thing is globally, one of the problems we have is that globally we are an insignificant emitter still, Sri Lanka. Even we stopped like our carbon emission completely now. It doesn't make any big difference if the other countries don't do that, right? So therefore, our contribution is less, and our priority is still on the adaptation. But as I mentioned to you, if we want to be competitive in the international trade and commerce, there's no other option that we also need to reduce our emissions, because otherwise there will be a lot of sanctions and barriers and taxes, etc. And our export market will be hampered through that. So this is quite important. And you might have seen this, especially in the garment industry, because there are a lot of standards coming in, and the garment factories are now investing in a lot of low carbon processes, etc. So this is quite important. But in Sri Lanka, our main emissions coming from the electricity and the transport sector. Electricity generation and the fossil fuel that we are used for transport sector, mainly for electricity. And at the moment, the stance is the best option for us is to increase our renewable energy share in the electricity generation. I think there are a lot of plans happening, but unfortunately, the investment requirement is quite large. At the same time, there's a bit of a problem with the overall system, or the grid that we maintain is not capable enough of absorbing a lot of renewable energy, or what you call the variable renewable energy. For example, if I meant, let's take solar. We can have solar power during the morning. Our daily electricity capacity is somewhere around 40 to 50 gigawatt hours. And we can produce even 50 gigawatt hours from solar, but unfortunately we have it during the daytime. In the night, we don't have it. So in the night, we need to have alternative systems or store what we produce during the daytime. And we have coal power plants, Unfortunately, we can't switch off the coal power plants during the daytime and switch it on in the evening, because you can't do it. Basically, to switch on and switch off, there should be at least around 2 to 3 weeks time for that transition. It's not an easy thing. So we are trapped. And sometimes, even though we have renewable energy, we need to run our coal power plants because we can't switch it off. And engineers might help me. So the transition is not only adding new renewable energy, but also improving our grid capacity and the technology and systems as well. So it's need a lot of new investments, but our economic situation now, so we don't get the concessional finance as of we used to do until our rating situation improves. But so far, all the renewable energy investments coming from individuals or the private sector. Individuals as putting rooftop solar, etc. And the private sector, like you have few companies coming in and investing at the moment, but those are not concessional finance. But if we want to rapidly change our energy balance, we need a lot of investment that will come in a concessional terms, lower interest rates, longer tenures, as well as other options as well. But no one is giving money for us at the moment to change our system or the grid enhancements and convert into smart grids, and hopefully it will come through. So there are plans, there are strategies. Unfortunately, we are not good at implementation, mainly because lack of finances and some other structural barriers as well. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, Mr. Ranga, thank you very much. Yes.
Welcome.
Any other questions? I can allow another one.
Mr. Ranga, I'm Mahesh from Kalani Valley, Kalani Plantation.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you very well.
The question is that you have mentioned earlier that there are two countries, Bhutan and Costa Rica, that we well known about the Bhutan situation. That is a prominent story. But what is the success story of Costa Rica?
Both countries have the same thing, the forestry. They have conserving their forestry like nothing, basically. For example, in Bhutan, it's there in their constitution. Whoever the people in the power need to make sure that there are 70% of their country is covered by forestry. It's their constitution. If they break it, that means the violation of constitution. The Costa Rica same. I don't know whether it's in the constitution, but legally there are, so they are conserving. So all the economic activities and the growth strategies of both the countries are in line with those. For example, Costa Rica, they are investing a lot in terms of ecotourism and the research tourism, etc. And they are promoting, rather than bringing in the production facilities, they are promoting what you call the orange economy, or the arts and culture and movies. They're earning a lot of money by allowing a lot of filmmakers to come and shoot their movies there. They're charging. So their economic drivers are quite different than of others. So I think that's the success factor. But unfortunately for other countries, including Sri Lanka, we have now passed that situation. We might not be able to go there. Because it's very politically sensitive. It's very economically sensitive, and people don't want to forego their luxuries. They want to have their comfort zone. So probably now we need to think of a different way of and a different pathway to go there. Thanks for that question.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think, Ranga, I should not disturb you furthermore because I know you are scheduled. Even from Bangkok, Thailand, from your office, with your busy schedule, when I talk to you, you have given me on this date. And thank you very much on behalf of our entire team. Unfortunately, I want to pass a small message from my MD, Dr. Rajare was here, and he need to shift to another meeting, and he want me to pass his regards, including my director CEO, Mr. Andrew Virakon. So on behalf of the leadership and in the entire team of Kalani Valley, as well as Harris Plantation sector, I would like to thank you very much. And I think we have a very good start now from the expert talk series. You have given the jump towards the next level, I think I can take that from the next level, from the second level onwards. So thank you so much. And I know that your contribution to our first ever Global Plantation Sustainability Summit was on 21st of July. I think the things that you addressed during that panel discussion number 3 on the accounting for nature and way forward strategies on sustainable financing approaches, I think still I'm getting certain comments from our stakeholders that the things that you added, the most valuable points into that topic. So thank you so much on that as well again. And I think we would like to work with you in future as well, as I discussed. I think one of the great resource we have produced from Sri Lanka, especially from Faculty of Agriculture, University of Peradeniya. I must mention that as well. Great product to the globe. We will not send you out. I know that it's a physical online session. We are physically disengaged, but we have a small token of appreciation. This is not just namesake climate neutral tea, but it's actually a sustainably sourced tea, pack of tea. So I will ensure that when you visit back to Sri Lanka, this will be delivered to you. Thank you very much, Ranga, and thank you very much. We will see you again and have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anuruddha, and it's a great pleasure to talk to you. And thank you very much for the opportunity given to talk to you all, and look forward to meeting you physically back in Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.
Okay, good night. Bye. So we are hoping to meet you all with another 2 weeks' time with the second interactive session on expert talks, maybe a totally different topic. So this will be our sustainable learning journey towards achieving goal number 4, quality education, and number 17, to strengthening the global partnerships. See you again with another fantastic session. Have a great evening. Thank you.